Hi all. Welcome to week 3 of the semester. This week we're going to be discussing understanding and learning more about intimate behavior. For assignments, the Chapter 2 quiz is due tonight at 11:59 p.m. Please make sure you complete that if you happen to be listening to my video before the end of the day Sunday. Chapter 2 test is due Monday the 12th by midnight. We have a fake news assignment this week that I'm going to be reviewing with folks. And please make sure you read Chapter 3 and complete the Chapter 3 test before midnight on Sunday the 11th. So I'm going to open our PowerPoint slides for this week. Chapter 2, we're talking about understanding about intimate behavior. So this week, the chapter this week focuses on some of our theoretical approaches regarding intimate relationships in our families. So we're going to talk about some of those sociological, theoretical approaches, as well as research. I like to, so whenever I talk about research in my courses, I do a section where I talk more about fake news. I think students are obviously exposed to research. We read articles about research very often, but I'm finding that in today's culture, I think the idea of fake news is something that students and everyone, citizens, need to really pay attention to. Because of technology, because of things like the internet, we have access to tremendous amounts of information, more so than ever possible historically prior to this time. So it becomes really important to become critical consumers of that information. And I guess actually I'm going to talk about our fake news assignment here first, since that's what I'm discussing. So I'm going to click into the fake news assignment, because I think being critical consumers of popular media at this point is a very, very important skill for anyone, because it's very easy for fake information to be out there. So we want to learn to identify when we're reading things, what is true and accurate information, and what things seem fantastic, what things seem incredible, what things, are maybe not accurate news items. So for this fake news assignment, each student is responsible for emailing me links to 2 different articles. So I want each student to find 1 fake article and 1 real article. Please do not use The Onion for fake stories. The Onion is a very popular satirical site, but it's very easy for students to identify student articles through The Onion as being fake news. So please don't use The Onions for your fake news articles. So every student is going to send me an email with 2 links to articles. Please tell me in your email which one is the fake news article and which one is the real article. After I receive everyone's email links, I'm going to be designing quizzes for each group, kind of just for fun, but to help everyone to try to determine what is fake news versus what is real news. You're going to be graded on submitting me the 2 links for the articles, and you'll be graded on taking the quiz once I post it, although your actual grade for the quiz won't count. So if you have a difficult time identifying some of these fake news articles in the quiz, don't worry that you'll be penalized for that. You're simply being graded for your participation in this exercise. I have a number of links here for students talking about how to recognize fake news stories, other information regarding fake news. This link right here, false, misleading, clickbaity, and or satirical news sources, actually gives you websites of some sources that have predominantly fake news or conspiracy theory type of news. So feel free to use that link if you're having a hard time finding some fake news websites. You can find that here on this resource. Here's the rubric for this assignment. Again, very simple. Submit me the 2 articles and complete the quiz. The quiz is not going to be posted until next week because I need to receive everyone's links and put those that quiz together. So for this week, you're just responsible for submitting me those 2 articles, and make sure that you read some of these links in terms of how to identify fake news, because that's going to be one of our focuses for this week. If you have questions regarding that, please make sure you email me. All right, I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint slides for this week because I want to talk a little bit about our theories. The chapter starts off talking about meaningfulness and that finding a life that has meaning is something that more and more people are striving towards. That just being happy may not be quite enough, that we want to find a sense of purpose, that we find that we are making valuable contributions to our social world. And the text talks about when we search for meaning, we really want to be independent thinkers. If we want to find meaning in our world, we want to make sure that we are critically evaluating the information that we are taking in around us, as opposed to just accepting things as fact or assuming that something is true when it may not actually be accurate. We want to avoid magical thinking, which is when we interpret two closely occurring events as though one caused the other. Today is Super Bowl Sunday. I'm recording this actually while my husband's downstairs watching the game, as I'm sure many students are watching the game right now. But magical thinking may be, I'm going to wear my Lucky Patriots jersey, or, I wear this shirt every single time the Patriots win, so I need to, if I don't wear this shirt, somehow I'm jinxing the team. Those are examples of magical thinking. We have mindsets, where we look at the world in a certain way based on our social location, which we talked a little bit about at the start of the semester, that those different elements of our social location affect how we view the world around us. And we want to be able to move beyond our social location, to have a greater understanding that other people are not going to see the world in the same way we do, because our social locations may be very different. So we want to move outside of our mindsets and again, start critically evaluating information around us. Here are some examples of magical thinking that you can certainly read in the text. Steps to critical thinking, making sure that we get an understanding of the problem. We want to gather information and try to interpret that information, develop a solution plan, and then evaluate how effective our plan was, because that can help us to also develop different strategies moving forward. If what we did this time we found wasn't necessarily that effective, we can also evaluate, well, what would we do differently next time? And of course, we're talking about critical thinking skills, which is something that college very much focuses on. We want to develop critical thinking skills for students instead of just assuming that we know the right way to do something or we know what is true and accurate. Again, we want to critically evaluate these things and start questioning, well, why do we think that, or how do we know that? Is that actually true, or is it something that we're assuming is, excuse me, or is it simply an assumption that we are making? So I want to talk a little bit about theories here to wrap up my video, because we have a number of theories that help us to view families in different kinds of ways. And there are a number of different theories. There are 8 that are summarized here in the following slides from the text. Our theories can be ways to help us understand family life. And there is no one theory that is better than the others necessarily. They are simply different ways of evaluating family life. So there are not necessarily right or wrongs as we talk about some of these very different type of perspectives. The theories are also broken up into macro-level orientation theories and micro-level orientation. Macro-level focuses on broad patterns across society. Maybe if we talk about how the economy is affecting our families. The economy is a broad pattern that will affect all families within society and may affect them in different kinds of ways. But that's more of a macro-level orientation. Micro-level orientation is when we focus on these small-scale patterns, when we look at people's interactions with one another. What happens when families come together? What happens in terms of those small-scale interactions? That is our micro-level orientation. This nice panel here talks about our 8 main theoretical approaches, talks about whether they are macro or micro-level orientations. features and some questions to help illustrate these different theoretical perspectives. This is a great chart to refer to. First theory that we're talking about is our structural functional perspective, where the family is a social institution that performs essential functions for society. When we talk about social institutions, those can be very broad. Again, broad features. This is a macro level perspective. So we talk about things like the economy, politics is a social institution, our educational system, the military. Family is a social institution. And there are essential functions that the family provides for society. One of these is we need to have new members. We need to have families having babies in order for society to continue. So that is an essential function of families, is this ongoing supply of new members. We also need to socialize these members. We need to teach them what it means to be productive members of our social world. That's not something that society at large is able to do. We need families to socialize these different members. Other functions of the family traditionally are to provide economic support for family members, deciding how we're going to allot those resources in terms of finances for our families, and to provide emotional support for family members. Because family members tend to live under the same roof, there's a lot of proximity there, meaning that emotional support is very much one of the functions of our family units. Here we have a little girl. We can tell she's a girl, or we're assuming she's a girl because she's dressed all in pink and surrounded by pink and flowery type of things. And this is an example of the start of our socialization. We start at a very early age, in infancy, prior to even children being born, where we start to socialize them in terms of what it means to be a boy or a girl in our society. The conflict perspective is another main theoretical perspective in sociology. And conflict perspective essentially looks at individuals and groups being in conflict with each other over scarce resources. So when we break that down into a family level, we're looking at conflicts over power. Who has more power and who has less power within relationships? Conflict over resources. How are we going to spend different resources, whether it's time as a resource, financial resources, but our conflict perspective focuses on those conflicts within families. Our symbolic interaction and perspective. This is a micro level because symbolic interactionists essentially look at those small scale interactions when we come into contact with one another. So a symbolic interaction perspective on families looks at what happens in terms of those family interactions and how do family members respond to one another. That essentially families create their own realities and they define their own situations based on this ongoing system of family members acting and other members reacting to them. Family members define what the situation is. That definition may not necessarily be based on reality. For example, if I see my husband being very sneaky with his cell phone and very private and trying to hide his phone from me, I might define that situation as my husband's cheating on me. Now, the reality may be that he's planning on getting me flowers for my birthday, or he's planning a surprise party. But the reality doesn't actually matter. My interpretation of that reality, my definition of that situation is what's important. I will then develop my self-image based on those interactions. I see my husband being sneaky with his phone. I assume he's cheating. I feel bad about myself. And then I'm going to act in some pretty predictable ways where I'm probably going to be pretty crappy to my husband based on my definition of that situation. So again, symbolic interactionists look at those small scale interactions between folks. Family systems looks at how family members are made up of family members are interconnected parts of a whole, and that changes in one part changes other parts. My kids are teenagers. We're looking at my daughter. One of my daughters is going to be turning 16 and she's going to be starting to drive. And so, family systems theory would look at how did those changes within one family member, how does that start to affect other people within our family?